voice of growth, mastering the mind and market.
A lot of people think all this success just happened overnight. If we can solve the challenges that we have, that will clear the way for the kind of exponential growth that you're talking about. The most concerning issue is energy. The research they do is absolutely essential in supporting the tech industry. Two of the most powerful research universities in the United States. We should be a national leader in clean energy. Start early when you're in college to form your enterprise. You know, I think this is the place right now for all of those reasons, and it's why we're being so successful. As a leader, one of your most important jobs, besides setting the vision of the organization and the direction of the organization, is to support your team with the resources they need to succeed at what they do. TSMC, of course, changes the equation.
Arizona has quietly become this technology hub that encompasses aerospace, semiconductor, defense, AI, all these things come together. In your opinion, what has been the inflection point that's caused these things to come to pass?
Well, I think it's been many, many years of working on developing the kind of business climate that's attractive to these kinds of companies. We've, over the years, and the Tech Council's been heavily involved in that, lowered corporate taxes, created the best research and development tax credit in the nation, created a refundable R&D tax credit for earlier stage companies, and an angel investment tax credit, just to name a few. You know, we have available land. Most major cities in the United States don't.
Right.
We're now the 5th largest city in America here in Phoenix. We have low taxes. I just mentioned the corporate taxes, but for individuals, we have low taxes, property. Sales tax is a little higher than most places. But I just think it's the business climate. It's the climate in general. People love to move here and live here. And we have modestly priced power. You know, large manufacturers use a massive
Tons
amount
of power.
So the conditions have been right. And then I think we've got some extraordinary economic development organizations, particularly the Arizona Commerce Authority. But in Tucson now, the Chambers of Southern Arizona, used to be Sun Corridor, and here in Phoenix, Greater Phoenix Economic Council. And all of them have played a remarkable role in educating people from around the world about the assets that this place has that makes it attractive for locating, particularly advanced manufacturing.
Yeah. One of the things that I find interesting about some of these new things happening with semiconductor in particular, people forget that Motorola started here a long time ago. So if you look at the bigger backdrop of all these big trends at play, AI, the gig economy, all the things happening with data centers, what do you see as the identity for Arizona for the next 25, 50 years?
So first of all, to the history you just mentioned, Motorola actually put an R&D center here in 1949. The Galvin brothers brought Motorola here. Within 2 or 3 years, they built a manufacturing facility. And within a number of years, they had 22 to 25,000 employees.
It's crazy.
So that was the beginning of the semiconductor industry. And then in 1979, 1980, Intel came. Today, they employ about 10,000 people here in the Phoenix area. But we have onsemi, microchip, microsemi, ASML, AMS. So this has long been a semiconductor region. TSMC, of course, changes the equation.
Yeah,
right?
It does.
The most sophisticated chip manufacturer on the planet, now making the most sophisticated chips right here in Arizona. And that has attracted the likes of Apple and Nvidia and others to put locations here as well. So The semiconductor industry has long been is one of the original technology industries. The other you mentioned earlier is aerospace and defense.
Right.
After World War II, of course, we built a lot of bases here during World War II, and after the war, a lot of the prime contractors moved their locations here to be close to the customer. In addition to that, there was I forgot what the act was called, but after the war, the military decided that defense contractors should not be close to the shore
Mhm.
because the Japanese got close to us during the World War. So a lot of those defense contractors moved inland, and Phoenix and Arizona in general was a beneficiary of that. Um, the next 50 years, first of all, AI, as we all know, is changing everything,
It is.
and it's affecting every industry in profound ways. We're going to become much more efficient and
Mhm.
effective at pretty much everything that we do. I think beyond AI, we're going to see probably in the next 3 to 5 years, quantum computing become more significant, and that will change everything
Yeah.
again. And then, as you know, the University of Arizona is making a really hard push on fusion,
Yep. I'm aware of
and
that.
fusion is now practical, right? That's probably at least 10 years away.
Mhm.
I think we're going to see a lot more before fusion, a lot more nuclear, small modular nuclear reactors, and conventional nuclear as well. And those are all necessary to fuel
Mhm.
a tech industry like we're creating here in Arizona. So I think the future holds lots of promise. Another industry that's growing. I'm proud to serve on the Arizona Space Commission,
Right.
and that's another sector that's growing here in Arizona. Uh, Working to build a spaceport in Yuma, Arizona. So that's another industry
Yep.
that's going to be moving forward.
Now, we've talked about a lot of the positive aspects of what's happening in Arizona, and, I mean, I came back to Arizona, having been from Tucson and Douglas, my hometown, and I left, and I went all over the place, and then I came back to raise my kids and to make my life in Arizona. What do you see as the things that we are lacking that would take us and just take us 10x? What if you had a magic wand, it could pick out, 2 or 3 things that you would say, "These 3 things would take us to the next level." What would those be?
Well, let me first talk about the challenges, because if we can solve the challenges that we have, that will clear the way for the kind of exponential growth that you're talking about,
Mhm,
in my view. One is workforce, right?
mhm,
We do pretty well in that regard. We've got three tremendous state universities. We've got Embry-Riddle and other institutions. We've got probably one of the best community college systems in the United
mhm.
States. The Arizona Commerce Authority is running all these workforce accelerators around the state, and we do okay. But there's still a lot of positions that are lacking
Mhm.
that need to be filled in these various industries.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of hard work going on right now to address that. But I think workforce is always going to be an issue. Water is an issue, right? To continue the growth in advanced manufacturing, large manufacturers need water. Uh, you mentioned data centers.
Mhm.
Traditionally, they need a lot of water. But in both cases, I think what's happening is that, first of all, if you look at Intel's website, they'll tell you that they actually generate more water than they consume because everything circulates, and they actually invest in technologies that create water.
Right.
Um, TSMC has a similar trajectory. And then data centers, if you follow that, there's a lot of pushback on data centers right now, but
Right.
and water is one of the issues. But for the most part, all new data centers are going to uh, address the water issue with new technologies and new methodologies for cooling servers, and that's already well underway. But water will continue to be an issue. We know the Colorado River situation
Mhm.
is not looking very good right now. So that's a challenge we have to overcome in order to continue to succeed. Um, Housing,
Mhm.
as we're attracting so many people here to Arizona, we need more housing than the industry has built.
Mhm.
And then finally, probably the most concerning issue is energy. Large advanced manufacturers and data centers, particularly AI uh, data data centers, consume massive amounts of energy. So these other things I talked about earlier, like nuclear and fusion and so on, have the potential to solve those issues going forward. But in the short run, I think it's going to inhibit some growth because they can't build capacity fast enough right now. There's challenges in that industry getting gas turbines, and frankly, nuclear is 10 years away. So, clean energy is one of the major solutions, and we have 300 days of sunshine, so it's a
Very true.
great place to do that. So, um, I think the other thing, we've come a long way in terms of our entrepreneurial community.
Mhm.
We have a lot more capital available. We've got a lot more support organizations and initiatives here. But we're not New York. We're not
Right.
Silicon Valley. So we've got a long way to go in that regard because we want to produce our own. Because those that become unicorns invest back into the
Yeah,
community. We see
exactly.
great examples of that around the country, particularly Salt Lake City,
Mhm. Yeah.
by example.
What's interesting about what you said are these challenges, and, call me an optimist or call me crazy, but they're not that crazy. They're not insurmountable.
Yeah,
There's a path there, and even more importantly, there is an opportunity for the right entrepreneurs to come in and just clean house.
yeah.
I mean, I travel to other places that are much more established. You mentioned Salt Lake City. You mentioned the Austin, the Boston, the New York City, all that. They're so established and they're almost immovable. Where here in Arizona and Tucson and Phoenix and the other areas, there just seems to be a different spirit, and the I call it the spirit of the West is still alive and well.
I couldn't agree more. We have flexibility, agility, and we're able to move people in this state
Mhm.
to focus on and solve those kinds of problems. So I share your optimism that all of these challenges will be overcome. Um, but we do need to focus time and effort and energy and funds to solve them.
Exactly. So this brings me to my next question, which is a dovetail off of that, is, with all this change that needs to happen, and with your experience having gone through change in many corporate roles and at the helm of the tech council for so long, what are the qualities that you believe are necessary for leaders, both in government and in the academic sector and in the entrepreneurial sector? What are some common leadership skills that should be developed?
Well, I think one is the ability to pivot as change occurs. There is always going to be change. There's going to be change in personnel. There's going to be change in the macro economy. There's going to be change. And a leader's ability to recognize what's going on and then adapt to the changing environment, I think, is a critical skill that all leaders need to have to be successful. I think valuing your staff. They're the ones that, you know, produce the output,
Yep.
um, that allows you to succeed. I think focusing as a leader, one of your most important jobs besides setting the vision of the organization and the direction of the organization is to support your team with the resources they need to succeed at what they do. So, that's job one. Um, Finding the right people is important. Finding the right people and putting them in the right seats
Mhm.
within the organization to succeed is a critical quality that I think leaders must possess. And then I mentioned agility with regard to our state and our economy. We individually need agility as well. Flexibility, agility are important skills that I think leaders require to again adapt to the changing world we all live in.
That's fascinating. If we were to look at some favorite leaders of you, people that you admire, people that you believe are prime movers or whatever, and we were going to have lunch together, the four of us, me, you, and two of your favorite leaders, who would they be and
Yeah.
why?
So I like Tim Cook. Um, Steve Jobs handed the company over to him, right? He
Yeah.
was sort of his number two. And he has persisted in growing the most valuable company in the world. I think it's worth $4 trillion or something
It's
like that now,
ridiculous.
right?
Yeah.
And he's been able to stay the course and maintain the culture that has made that company so innovative. And it's almost like a cult, right?
Yeah, it is.
People with Apple.
I'm part of the cult, by the way. I love all my Apple products because they all talk to one another and there's a certain feel to them. I love it.
There. Let me just talk about a local individual that I have great admiration for. I just read his most recent book called "Break All the Rules," and that's Jim Cantrell, who runs Phantom
Yep.
Launch down in Tucson. In many, he was one of the first employees that Elon hired at SpaceX and helped shape that company from the get go. And in many ways, he helped create the new space industry that
Yes, he
we're
did.
now in. And he's just a fascinating individual, fun to be around. And so those are a couple of people that I think about. I think having Michelle Obama at a meeting would also be
Mhm.
cool, right? She's unbelievably smart and capable. There's a lot of people have been talking about her potentially running for president, although she's stiff armed that over
Yeah.
and over. But, having someone like that who's been at the seat of power in the room and extracting knowledge from
Yeah.
them would be very interesting.
Mhm. Jim is a friend of mine as well, and he actually will be on this podcast later in
Oh,
the summer.
excellent.
And he's definitely he's done a lot, and he's got a lot of stories that
He
he
does.
shares in
He's a
front and
storyteller.
behind the camera. You know,
Yeah, he's a storyteller for sure. Read his new book if you haven't.
I haven't read it
It's
yet. No.
really exceptional.
So you mentioned the three universities a few minutes ago, of which I'm an alumni of one of those. Very proud Wildcat, but also am still do work with ASU. I'm on the Venture Devils um, judging panel and so forth. But if you were to look at the pieces that have been built at these universities, where do you see them playing a role in not only Arizona's future, which is important, but the global economy as well?
So first of all, they play such a fundamental role in producing the workforce, right? That we consume not here only here in Arizona, but frankly around the world. These institutions aren't just here in Arizona;
Mhm.
they have tentacles around the world and collaborate with researchers around the world. So, producing the workforce is a critical role, but particularly for the state universities, the research they do is absolutely essential
Mhm.
in supporting the tech industry. So, as we well know, it's been a few decades now since large corporations quit investing
Mhm.
in research and development
Yeah.
and rely, not exclusively, but a lot on universities to do that research, all kinds of collaborations going on. And U of A and ASU are two of the most powerful research universities in the United States.
Mhm.
I'm really excited about the new president and particularly the head of research and partnerships at the University of Arizona, Tomas Diaz del Rubio. He's doing an extraordinary job, I think. And, U of A had a little hiccup there, and I think they've fully recovered from that and are now on a really, really good path forward. But you know, the optics program there at the University of
Mhm.
Arizona is the number one program in the world.
Yeah, it
Um,
is.
a lot of this technology we've already talked about today relies on optics and photonics
Heavily.
to be successful, and we're in a great position there. I think those two institutions are essential not only to Arizona's success, technology industry success, but the nation's success. And they're contributing in a manifest way in addressing the needs of industry and the public.
Yeah, you have a very unique position, Steve. You are, I don't know, multi-legged. You're like an octopus. You've got one leg in university, one leg in the government space, one leg in some nonprofits, one leg. You're kind of spread out,
Yeah.
which gives you a very unique perspective. If you were to collect a an industry that you wish Arizona played more in other words, something outside of what we do now, is there something in particular you wish we did more here in the state?
Yeah, I'm really excited about the Arizona Space Commission because we have incredible assets here, particularly again at the two main universities, U of
Mhm.
A and ASU. You can talk about Osiris Rex,
Mhm.
you could talk about Psyche at ASU. I know Jim Bell, who serves on the Space Commission with me, controls a robot that's on Mars.
That's
He
crazy.
drives a robot. And so we've got incredible assets in astronomy and astrophysics, and but we're not leveraging that sufficiently. And so that's one of the roles of the
Mhm.
new Space Commission is to develop a strategy. Unfortunately, Texas and Florida and California have big brands when it comes to
Right.
space. And Arizona has an opportunity to do that. So that's an area that I think we need to focus more energy and capability on. Semiconductors are going really well. I think that's going to continue to grow. I think for a long time we should be a national leader in clean energy.
Mhm.
Right? We talked earlier about the 300 days of sunshine, and you know that's it's so essential right now in addressing the power needs of this nation, not just here in Arizona, but of this nation. So growing the clean energy
Mhm.
sector, and then we do pretty well on the software side. I think we have about 800 software companies here in Arizona
Wow.
now, so we're doing pretty well there. I think the future that I talked about earlier in quantum, we're behind.
Yeah.
We're behind many other states. One of the advantages so many other states have is they have state legislatures
Mhm.
that make investments in these kinds of industry
Yeah.
sectors. We're not known for doing that here in Arizona. I don't suspect that that's going to change soon. So that's an obstacle we have to
Mhm.
overcome um, because funding is necessary to be successful. Investing in assets that help those industries succeed and grow is important. So again, I think we're behind in quantum. The universities are doing a lot, but there's
Mhm.
not much happening in the private sector, like in Colorado and other states. So those are a few.
Yeah, you look at, like, Bell Labs did so much
Yeah,
for the industry,
yeah.
the semiconductor, the satellite, fax machine, I mean, so many things happened there. And I was gonna ask this question, but you can put your laser sight on this. What could government do better? Like, where are we lacking in particular? You mentioned funding. Is there any other place you think government can help
So a
without
lot
getting political?
a,
I
a,
mean, if you want to, but
a lot of my members, Jim Cantrell, we could talk about, would say the most important thing that government can do is to stay out of the way, right? Not over regulate, industry so that it can succeed at what it does. So I think, that's always been sort of a tenet of the Tech Council, light regulatory environment. And we have that here in Arizona. It's the reason Waymo came here, right? It's the reason the self-driving car industry is a major influence here today in Arizona. So I think that's important. I do think, once the economic conditions improve here in Arizona, because we're looking at a deficit over the next couple of years, that the state should be looking at its peers around the country and looking at ways to fund the kind of innovation that grows these industries. It hasn't been able to do much of that. Here and there. Initiatives will be funded that are usually managed through the Arizona Commerce Authority that does a really great job of that. But I think the legislature should be investing in the future. And so that is political, but we won't get into that.
Yeah. The final two questions are kind of a double barrel. They're very similar, but they're to a slightly different audience. If you were to give advice to a young entrepreneur, a homegrown person here in Arizona that is maybe in the middle of college, but has this drive and really wants to create change, what would you tell that person? Part B, which I'll get you to think as you answer part A, is what would you tell a company in some other state of why they should come to Arizona?
Okay. So for the students, first of all, as I indicated earlier, there are incredible assets now in this state to support entrepreneurs. The Arizona Commerce Authority runs some of those. The Arizona Innovation Challenge, which actually funds early stage companies. They have Venture Launch, which supports the companies uh, in their effort to to become fundable. The Venture Madness, essentially a venture capital conference that we've been doing since the 90s, is a good place for them to hang out, to see what other pitches look like, meet investors. All those things are important. Every one of the universities today has programs to support entrepreneurs. As you know, at UA, they have the McGuire
Yep.
School there. And so find those assets within the academic realm that you're in. There are people in those positions now, too, that are there just to support students that have an entrepreneurial bent.
Right.
Start early when you're in college to form your enterprise, right? Start thinking about applying for a small business innovation research grant, those kinds of things. So I think just take advantage of the resources. Just last week, the Flynn Foundation did its Biopreneur conference, incredibly successful. All kinds of entrepreneurs presenting their ideas and funders there in the room, listening to those presentations and potentially investing in some of those companies. So just leverage the assets. As you know, we have a bunch of angel groups here, Desert Angels out of Tucson, ATI, Arizona Technology Investors here in Phoenix. Even Grand Canyon University has the Canyon Angels. So you can get some early stage funding through those kinds of resources. And today we have more venture capital than we've ever had before here in Arizona. And the venture capital, AZVC, which is one of those, was originally capitalized about 110 million or something like that, maybe 120, is raising another fund now.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, just recently announced it. So I think we're building that environment to support entrepreneurs here in Arizona. And then on the corporate side, I'll go back to the things I mentioned earlier. Available space, affordable space, right? Whether we're talking raw land or a building, if you compare us to those places you mentioned, Boston, Silicon Valley, Denver, Seattle, we're very economical. We have a low tax environment. We have a light regulatory environment. We have an incredible quality of life here in Arizona. I think that's why a lot of us stay here. You and I mentioned that
Exactly.
earlier. So, and then I can't tell you how many times companies that have moved here, I've heard them say the Arizona Commerce Authority was just incredible in supporting their efforts here. And we have the other local economic development organizations that provide that support, like the Chambers of Southern Arizona and GPEC. So, I think this is the place right now for all of those reasons, and it's why we're being so successful.
Couldn't agree more. I do have a bonus question,
Okay.
and this is maybe a little bit deeper for you.
Yeah.
In your career, I know your birthday's coming up very soon. Happy birthday. What do you want your legacy to be? When people look back upon the work you did, the lives you changed, the mountains you've moved, what do you want to be remembered for?
Well, let me talk about the last 18 years, and maybe even before that with the Arizona Innovation Network and the High Tech Industry Cluster. Um, a lot of people think all this success just happened overnight. It happened because of decades of people like me and many, many others focusing on the things that had to change, that had to be addressed in order to create the environment that leads to the kind of success that we're exhibiting today. One of the things that we do at the Arizona Tech Council that doesn't get a lot of notoriety is our policy work at the local, state, and federal level. We're involved in every aspect of policy that affects technology companies. So I think, um, particularly as president and CEO of the Arizona Technology Council, being recognized for the kind of support that we've provided to the science and technology industry for a few decades now is what I'd like to be remembered for.
Thank you so much, Steve. This has been very informative, and I'm glad we were able to connect today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Cheers.
Cheers.